Good afternoon, everyone. Just giving you a few more minutes for some more attendees to arrive. We'll be starting our webinar in the next few minutes. Good afternoon, guys, and thank you very much for attending our webinar on the Citrix Summit updates. We've got quite a few announcements that have been made at the recent summit, so without further ado, we'll get into them. I'm Colin Prime-Moore. I'm the CTO of Ultima Business Solutions, and I'd like to welcome a couple of other presenters in today. Firstly, Andy McCulloch, who is one of our senior technical consultants here at Ultima, and Lyndon John Martin, who's the Senior Systems Engineer at Citrix. So I'd like to welcome them both to the webinar today. So we'll cover off the Citrix visions around where they're going with all of their solutions these days, around their focus for the next year going forwards, some of the recent announcements around their acquisitions, going into things like the cloud and how they're starting to adopt the cloud area, more integration points around the Microsoft partnership and the like. So without further ado, what I'd like to do is hand over to Lyndon John from Citrix, who's going to guide you through the vision for Citrix.
Brilliant, thanks Colin. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Brilliant, thanks. So welcome everybody. So my name's Lyndon John Martin, Lyndon, LJ, whichever you prefer, Senior Systems Engineer at Citrix, and I look after the partner community within the UK. I've been at Citrix a little over 4.5 years now, so I'm quite a seasoned pro and veteran. So what I'm going to start off with is sort of our worldview, and then I'll get into our vision and strategy for the remainder of the year and where Citrix is going. So I think first things first, if we take a look back at the end of 2016, A lot has changed within the IT industry overall. I think two major things have always stuck. One major thing always stuck out, which is around cloud. I think that's going to start to accelerate a little bit more, specifically in the UK, based upon the fact that we now have both an Azure data centers in the UK as well as AWS data centers in the UK. Towards the end of last year, I think a couple of things that started to crop up quite a bit on the minds of a lot of CXOs was the fact that cybersecurity was becoming a real issue and a concern. If you think about the number of ransomware attacks throughout the course of 2016, how they started to escalate and grow, IoT devices are now starting to come out into organizations a lot more, not just at home. So if you think about devices such as Alexa, or even Siri on your mobile phone or Cortana. Those are leveraging AI backends, which obviously improve our user experience, but at the same time, some of these devices, not necessarily your mobile devices, but other devices that could hook into things like Alexa as an example, if they are in the context of using a beacon through IoT, if they're vulnerable and not secured down correctly, effectively that can open up quite a large hole in your fabric. It can also make you susceptible to things like DDoS attacks and many other things like that. Mobile is always a big topic. It continues to be a big topic, I find. Organizations are still continuing to shift. Now, yes, there is a picture there of a mobile phone, but that doesn't necessarily mean that mobile means using a mobile phone. It could mean that you're on the go or working from different locations across different device types and form factors to achieve whatever goal that you need to achieve, i.e. complete a business process, complete a document, or complete a task. AI, I think that's going to start to become more and more important as we move into 2017. So I'll give you a very simple example. So the CES show, which happens at the beginning of every single year, it's obviously finished up and wrapped up the first 2 weeks in January. One of the big headline events that I've been following for quite some time is around the fact that cars will be able to self-drive themselves, and that leverages in part machine learning and also AI. NVIDIA has actually partnered with 4 of the 5 that were actually at the show that actually leverage and use their technology to actually enable cars to actually drive themselves or assist the driver. In some instances, they can obviously then leverage a back-end AI system, which that second piece actually hasn't come into full-blown testing. It's still going on in the background, but I think that will become more important as we move forward into the future. A lot of the stuff, I can send a few article links. You can take a look at this in your own time. So that pretty much sums up our worldview. In terms of our strategy, what are we actually doing? What are we actually seeing? How are we approaching all of this? It's pretty simple. So we're very much still focused on the delivery of apps, data, and your network, but also making sure that we keep the context around making sure that it's secure, and also in the context of cybersecurity, meaning that no matter what you're attempting to access, a network, an app, or some form of data on the back end, it's still completely secure. We have I suppose he's not new anymore, but our CEO, Kirill, as part of actually coming into the role, he's obviously visited quite a few customers. Throughout his visits, he's had many different conversations with customers, and it's quite interesting. What he's actually been hearing is when customers talk about Citrix, they talk about Citrix as not just being that application virtualization vendor, but also there's elements of security in there. That follow me data company with a bit of security in there. That networking company that provides me with Netscaler and all the benefits around Netscaler, plus all the security benefits. There's always been an underlying security theme across each one of those pillars. And it's quite interesting that a lot of organizations don't just view us as that application vendor, that autonomy data company, or that networking company. That view us as that and a lot more. That actually got me thinking, and I actually thought to myself, well, actually, if I think about it, we have quite a lot of security built into our products across the board. If you take a look at our virtualization technology stack, we've always been secure by design. We've always enabled remote access that is inherently always secure. Why? Because the data never leaves the data center. We're effectively remoting just the pixels. If we look at data and mobility, so through the acquisition of ShareFile and part through Zenprise, we actually enabled to allow organizations to embrace mobility and make sure that any data that's on those devices is completely secured and you can actually do a selective wipe or a full wipe. If we look at the network context, so NetScalers allows you to do many different things, but it also provides very fine-grained access to your trusted networks on the back end, or connects different networks together as well, providing very fine level of controlled access across the board. And then finally, as we move forward, we're bringing a lot of this all together with Citrix Cloud. Citrix Cloud provides us the ability to abstract all the management components around all these different elements, uplift them into an evergreen control plane, and then you just focus on what we call a resource location, which is effectively where your applications, your data, and your network ultimately reside. And that can sit in a public cloud, that could sit in a private cloud, or it can be a combination of the following two, meaning that it can also be in a hybrid cloud scenario. Just waiting for the screen to update. Colin, can you move it forward? There we go. Great. So I think the next big thing that is probably on a lot of people's minds on this call is Citrix and Microsoft, that whole better together setting that we talked about. So last year we actually came out with Microsoft on stage and actually talked about a few key things around things that we're doing together to enable people to work better, and also to bring the two organizations closer together so that we can actually deliver upon a few things to make a user's workspace a lot more modern and a lot more secure and a lot more mobile and a lot more optimized. And I think a couple of key things that came out of that are still prevalent today, and we've expanded upon a lot of these as we're moving forward. So first and foremost, Microsoft Azure is our strategic cloud. What does that mean? It means that we are always going to lead with Microsoft Azure as our primary way forward for infrastructure as a service, i.e. public cloud. We still leverage and use AWS for those customers that choose to prefer to use AWS, but we always lead with Microsoft Azure. So as a very prime simple example, if you are a new ShareFile customer, any new ShareFile, or if you're about to become a ShareFile customer today, you will always have your effectively your Citrix data, if you choose to have it controlled and managed by Citrix, hosted in Microsoft Azure. Couple other things that we talked about is we talked about obviously Microsoft is replacing ARA, so Azure Remote App, and that is now being replaced with something called Zen App Essentials for Azure, effectively where we take all the really cool stuff around HDX, where we can actually deliver virtual desktop quite smoothly, quite simply, quite easily to a user, and enable things like file, print, copy, all those sorts of things, and enabling a really good and simple user experience. We're going to talk about this a little bit more later on, so I'm not going to give you too much context now, but that is going to be available fairly soon. The other thing that we talked about is the delivery of Windows 10 from Microsoft Azure. So that is going to be coming out as well at some point in H1. Effectively, this allows you to take a Windows 10 enterprise desktop. You need to have the appropriate licenses within your pool, and effectively you can bring your own licenses to the Azure cloud, leverage and use Azure and Citrix on top of that to actually excuse me, provision and put together your Windows 10 desktop and deliver it out to your users from the Microsoft Azure cloud. Zen Mobile Essentials is effectively where we are taking, it's effectively two things. We are taking our existing Zen Mobile Cloud and effectively lumping this into Citrix Cloud and offering this as a service, so that organizations and partners don't necessarily have to go through the process of creating an entire Zen Mobile environment. They can now do it within a few clicks, and the provisioning happens in the background. And within a matter of 1 to 2 hours, depending on the prerequisites and your approach, you can stand up a Zen Mobile environment pretty rapidly and pretty quickly. We're also doing a lot of integration with Microsoft EMS. I don't have too much on that today, but we will talk about that and give you a lot more context, but it's not available today. But the first part of the integration between Citrix and Intune/EMS has already happened, and that comes in the form of our NetScaler integration with Intune. So I'll talk about this in a moment in a little bit more context, and I've also got a very short demonstration that actually shows the integration already. The next thing that could naturally happen is where we take on board Zen Mobile, along with Intune and bring that closer and align it more close together. Finally, Sky for Business, we continue to develop that roadmap quite strongly and quite well. If you are a Sky for Business customer and you're a Citrix customer, and perhaps you have already virtualized Sky for Business, that's great. If you'd like to contribute towards the roadmap, please get in touch with either myself or Ultima. We can point you to the correct documentation that we have that will walk you through how we can further develop Sky for Business with Microsoft as a priority as to what we actually need to develop first and to offload and to excuse me, make sure it happens in a quicker time frame, perhaps versus a longer time frame. So if we take a look at NetScaler Gateway's integration with Microsoft Intune, so remember this is effectively the first release version of our close alignment around mobility between Citrix and Microsoft. So if we look at a mobile device, this individual user wants to effectively access the internal network. Now they are a Citrix customer, they're also a Microsoft customer, and the IT admins have inherently allowed people to just take, excuse me, allow their entire device to access the internal trusted network. So typically they'll go into their device, set up the VPN, and they'll be able to access any internal resources. But now the admin's made a few changes with the current release of NetScaler 11.1 and integrated that with Microsoft Intune. So that now when a user attempts to log into the gateway, it pops up with a message that actually says to the user, this device is out of is not compliant. So in other words, you cannot access your internal trusted network. You need to go through a process of actually enrolling a device. So you click on the visit the MDM. The user then obviously goes through an enrollment process. The device therefore becomes managed and compliant. Thereafter, NetScaler then allows that network access control of the device to the internal trusted network on the back end, and they're actually able to access that internal intranet resource as an example that they may have been choosing to access. So let's take a look at a quick short video. So we're looking at an iOS device here. The user is intending to access an internal address, ad1.citrix.lab. They've got the Citrix VPN agent actually installed on their device. It's already been pre-set up and pre-configured. All the user is going to do is tap to configure it by toggling it on to actually enable them to put in the username and password. What's going to happen now is it's going to say that you're not actually able to use this. You need to go through the enrollment process. So what you're actually seeing now is the user is actually going through the MDM enrollment process for Microsoft Intune. So you need to go through all the necessary steps of installing a device and the certificate as well as the MDM profile on the device. Thereafter, once that is actually completed, the user will then be able to go back to the Citrix VPN, toggle that on, authenticate, and the device will actually have the ability to then access anything on an internal trusted network on the back end. Plus, RT is confident and assured that the device is managed through the MDM provider, i.e. they can do a device scan, integrity check in terms of what applications are installed, check if the device is jailbroken or rooted, and thereafter take preventative measures to either selectively wipe the device or lock the device out or mark the device as out of compliance, therefore not allowing it to access the internal network. So as you can see here, the user has actually completed this. They can now go back to the NetScaler VPN toggle to actually log it on, and actually have the entitlement and ability to then access the internal trusted network now. So the last piece there, they were actually able to access ad1.citrix.lab. So Colin, over to you. That's it for me now. I will speak to all of you very shortly. If there's any questions, please feel free to drop them in the chat window and I'll answer them.
So LJ, just very quickly to catch up on there. So is that effectively giving sort of per application VPN technology to Intune?
No. So in this particular instance, this is V1. So version 1 is where we take and allow the entire device access to the internal trusted network on the back end. 1, through NetScaler. 2, that control is blocked/enabled, provided that the user has actually been enrolled into Microsoft Intune. Version 2, which is scheduled to come out at some point this quarter, worst case scenario next quarter, is the integration of where we actually allow the per application VPNs to start to come out, and that will come with the Zen Mobile Essential service, which is not available just yet.
Fantastic. Brilliant. Thank you. Cool. So thanks to RJ. You'll hear a bit more from him a bit later on. Now with some of the XenApp updates and Zen Desktop updates, I'd like to hand over to Andy McCulloch, who was at the Citrix Summit event for us. So without further ado, I'll hand over the reins to Andy. As long as Andy takes himself off mute.
Thanks, Colin. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Perfect. Right, so we'll dive straight in. So what I'll be going through is some more product-specific updates, as long as the screen catches up. So first off the bat, we've got HCX.net. So there's been some marketing flurry around this recently, but what this is effectively talking about is the next incarnation of HDX, which is going to be coming in. Some components are available at the moment in tech preview, but as a whole, they'll be appearing in the next release of XenApp and Zen Desktop. So there have been numerous enhancements to the HCX protocol. So HCX.next, as a whole, the headline figure that you'll get is that you can see up to 60% bandwidth reduction at scale. So this is based on scalability testing Citrix have done internally. In terms of real-world cases, what we're more likely to see is somewhere between kind of like 28 to 40% bandwidth reduction for your HDX connections versus what you're seeing at present. So that's not a bad return for a new release. One of the other things that we're seeing is that there'll be a reduction in server-side CPU usage for the VDA for producing the same graphic performance, which is a remarkable achievement, really. So these changes are actually going to be enabled by default in future releases, so it's definitely something to be aware of. One of the components that's being introduced is the concept of adaptive transport. So this is looking at the transport mechanism for getting the content, the user experience in front of your user. So looking at transport protocols, UDP is brilliant. It's really efficient at real-time transfers. So you tend to see voice and video applications will utilize UDP because it's very efficient at getting quite high quality media to users efficiently. UDP is pretty unreliable though. There's no real kind of reliability mechanisms built into it, but then the view is that for real time, by the time you've dropped a packet, it doesn't really matter because it's going to be too late to recover. Otherwise, you start introducing buffering, and that impacts on user experience. TCP, on the other hand, is engineered to be reliable by its nature, but as a result, it's quite conservative. So what you tend to find is that if you've got any kind of variability in your network, then what you can find is that you're not actually getting as much out of your underlying network as you potentially could, which is where you'll see lower throughput between clients and your infrastructure, where TCP is compensating for fluctuations in your network. Now, casting our minds back a year or so ago, Citrix introduced FrameHawk as a new protocol. Now, FrameHawk was Citrix kind of dangling its toes in the waters of UDP. FrameHawk was for a very specific use case of where users were connecting via 4G or LTE connections, which inherently are going to be fairly unreliable. So we expect to see highly congested networks, we expect to see packet loss, not really great network scenarios for Citrix. Now, FrameHawk utilized UDP to combat this, but one of the downsides of FrameHawk, it was actually really bandwidth intensive. So it wasn't really a particularly good use case for most WAN connected users. But it fitted its purpose at the time. So what Citrix have actually done is they've engineered a control layer on top of UDP, so to address the unreliable nature of UDP. And because of this enhancement, that enables us to use UDP as a transport protocol for HDX. Now, this means that we can then basically get more throughput on the same network connections, which then enables a higher performance for the user. There are some videos on YouTube available just showing kind of the difference in throughput that you experience in TCP versus UDP, so they're certainly worth a look. There's some comparisons against previous versions of previous releases of Citrix, which kind of show the real difference between the two. So if you've got any WAN connected sites where you've got kind of variable networks, then HTX over UDP can solve a real problem for you. And one of the benefits of adaptive transport is that the key is really in adaptive. So the idea being is that adaptive transport will be enabled, and it will automatically work out which is the best transport mechanism for you to use based on your user's connection scenario, whether or not TCP is going to be optimal for performance or whether or not it should use UDP. So HTX.next is actually incorporates two different aspects. So adaptive display v2 has been around since 7.11. Now adaptive display, what that's doing is it's using the right protocol for the right content. So Citrix have a lot of different protocols under their hat. I think it was 5 at the last count. Some of them are optimized for video, some of them are better at static content. They've got different performance requirements on the server side, and they've got different network characteristics. So choosing the right one can be a bit of a pain. Now what adaptive display will actually do is look at the content that is on your screen at any one point, and it will work out based on each individual screen region which is the most appropriate codec for it to be using for getting that display down to the user. So you can actually have it using both H.264 and thin wire at the same time for different regions of the screen. So an example of that would be browsing the internet and you happen to hit a web page, or pretty much any web page these days, where they've got a nice high def banner advert which is going to sit there scrolling through, utilizing a lot of bandwidth. So what it can do is intelligently use H.264 for rendering that video, yet still use thin wire for generating the rest of the screen content. So HTX.next is actually a combination of the adaptive display technology that's been around since 7.1 and the enlightened data transport or adaptive display, which is coming in versions soon to be released. In terms of implementation requirements, the ports are exactly the same. So the only requirement from a network perspective is that where you've got TCP ports open, we also need to have UDP ports open to enable that protocol.
Do you mind if I jump in here, Andy?
Sure, go for it.
Do you want to go back one?
Yep.
So I think the other thing to keep in mind is what we're actually doing and how we're actually making a lot of this happen is when you get that up to 60% bandwidth saving, and I'll agree with Andy that it's probably not going to always be 60%, it's definitely going to be a little bit less than that. I'd say probably between 40 to 60 to be safe. What we're actually doing is when you leverage and use EDT and use that in conjunction with adaptive display v2 that comes in the next release of Sun Desktop, effectively what we're calling HTX Next. It means that we can accelerate not just the graphics capabilities to what you see on the screen, but we're actually also accelerating all the virtual channels. So things like file cut, copy and paste, even print jobs actually now become substantially quicker and faster. What it will also do is if you are in a location that does not allow UDP, the client itself automatically pick this up and recognize that and automatically fall back to TCP. The second thing, which is probably the most important thing from a user point of view, is if we're talking about just the new version of adaptive display that's coming in the next release, it gives you all these bandwidth savings. Guess what? There's no receiver change there in any way, shape, or form. You can go back and use old receivers or even the current receivers today, and this will just work. If you're wanting to use EDT over and above that, there will be some movements around the receivers that you need to look at to move up to, if that makes sense. Back to you, Andy.
Perfect, thanks LJ. So yeah, it's some very nice enhancements there, and I think it's going to be quite simple to see pretty quick returns.
Definitely.
So Another big announcement is Citrix acquiring Unidesk. So some of you may or may not be aware of Unidesk, so we'll just kind of have a quick run through on kind of who they are and what they do. So Unidesk have been around for about 15 years now, so I wouldn't like to swear by it, but according to their websites, they actually invented layering, which is a bold statement considering the number of players in the space. But they've certainly got some strong history to their company, and they've been kind of in the area for a very long time, and they've got some unique approaches to solving the application layering challenges and desktop layering as a whole. So what do they actually do? So in the EUC space, we've been talking for a long time about splitting the desktop into layers. If you split the desktop into layers, it becomes inherently more manageable because you're managing the individual components rather than managing the desktop stack as a whole. What Unidesk does is actually provide technology to enable splitting the desktop stack into separate layers without having to combine a plethora of different technologies. So we have solutions at the moment that will manage our platforms for us, that can manage our OSs, that will manage our applications for us, and things in the user environment management space. So when you actually look at splitting your desktop into layers, you start to have to look at multiple products and multiple solutions to try and deliver that, which in itself can kind of add complexity to the overall solution. So the concept with Unidesk is to be able to handle the majority of those actually in one package. So what we tend to find in most Citrix deployments is that it's the concept of a golden image. All the image-based deployment mechanisms are nice and simple if everyone uses the same thing. What you tend to find is that not everyone uses the same thing. There's going to be little variations. There's going to be departmental requirements. There's going to be user-specific requirements. And how do you actually handle that? Do you look at investing in application virtualization to be able to dynamically deliver those applications into the user? Do you look at siloing different environments for different use cases? Quite a lot of organizations will look down the siloing route, but the problem you get with siloing is that when you're doing that to accommodate different requirements, then you naturally increase the management overhead of that. So whereas you've introduced a solution based on a single golden image, as soon as the requirements change, then you're looking at kind of managing 2, 3, 4 images, 5 images, and they all need patching, maintaining, they need application updates rolling out into them. It has management overhead, and it takes actual time to accommodate the addition of new builds into your environment. What Unidesk allows you to do is start to manage single instances of all the different layers. So it allows you to separate out the applications into separate layers. It allows you to separate the operating system. So the operating system gets missed in quite a lot of layering solutions because they'll be targeted very much at the applications. Whereas the operating system is another component that as soon as you start introducing silos, then you've got multiple instances that need patching, maintaining, updating, making sure that everything's consistent. So, just trying to move through the slide. So, because layering has its place in the VDI space and in the EUC space, Citrix actually have a application layering solution. They have app disks. VMware also have app volumes, but the problem is that we don't really see a lot of adoption of these solutions in customer deployments. And there are some reasons why, which I'll just go through now. So both solutions involve application layers consisting of disks. Now, these will typically be attached using some mechanism when a particular virtual machine boots. So when a machine starts up, it will have a golden image actually associated with the virtual machine, and then it will fetch its disk assignments and it will go off and attach any virtual disks which are assigned to it. And then within that particular OS, there'll be an agent which will contain IO filter drivers, which mean that when something's actually running, it will then have a view of all these different disks that have been attached and will kind of like merge those dynamically so applications in the different layers are able to execute. Now, one of the problems with that is that the more layers you have, the slower it gets. So what we have from the vendors is the recommendation that actually these are great approaches, but we really recommend that you don't have any more than 10 application layers, which is brilliant right up until the point when you've got more than 10 applications. So then you've got to make the choice of, well, I've got 300 applications. I should really not have more than 10 applications. So that means I have to have an application layer with 30 applications in it. That's not really separating things out anymore. That's just minimizing the issue. So how does Unidesk get around that? Within the Unidesk Management Console, you have separate layers. So we have a layer, for example, in this nice picture, we've got a layer with Adobe, we've got a layer with Chrome, we've got a layer with Office. We also have a layer with the operating system, and we have a separate layer with the platform. So I'll talk more about the platform component shortly, but the operating system is a very interesting one. So again, this is one that not a lot of layering companies will do. So the actual OS will be a separate layer in and of itself. So just think about the single point of management concept. When you've got multiple silos, having the ability to update, manage, maintain one operating system layer. So you have your company standard 2012 R2 OS layer, your company standard Windows 10 layer. Those can then be deployed across multiple silos, reducing the amount of management overhead for actually accommodating those. The application layers, you can have one app per layer. In fact, the recommendation is for one app per layer. Now, where this differs from the AppDisks approach is that when you publish those layers, you don't dynamically add those to VMs as they're booting. Unidesk will effectively squash all those layers, and when it publishes it, the output is an image. So that image will consist of a VHDX or a VMDK, an actual image file which can be consumed by your hypervisor, which can be consumed by your provisioning product. So Unidesk will integrate with your hypervisors, it will integrate with provisioning services, it will integrate with MCS. It'll also integrate with cloud solutions, so it will deploy to Azure and AWS as well. So the actual provisioning process is a case of selecting what layers you want to build up your image and then publishing that to the resource location of your choice. So that then removes the overhead of having to attach multiple disks to virtual machines. Everything's coming in as one image without the performance overhead of having multiple layers that the OS needs to look through to find content. So that's how we do image deployment. Now, where things get slightly more dynamic is the concept of elastic layers. So elastic layers are effectively a layer that you assign to a user. Now, these are assigned at logon, dependent on who you are. So when you publish them, you can assign a rule to it. So you may say users in a particular group, or Joe blogs in the marketing department wants this particular Adobe product. You can publish them to users in a very similar way as you would with XenApp. Now, these are dynamically assigned at logon. These will work on Zen Desktop and XenApp, which is fairly unique. So you can have a particular layer that's assigned to a user that is only visible within their session on the XenApp server, and it will not be accessible to anyone else. So elastic layers are efficient, but they do have an overhead, so we get back to the point where you need to be cautious with numbers. So obviously there will be a time impact in terms of how many you've got. So if it takes, for example, a second for it to attach a layer, if you're assigning 15 layers to a user when they log on, then it'll add 15 seconds onto their logon time. So for targeting specific apps at users, it's a useful option to have. But where possible, you should be looking to integrate applications into the images that you're publishing. One of the other aspects that you have available with elastic layers is the ability to assign a personal disk. So this is in the same space as PVDs or personal virtual disks. So you can actually assign a writable layer to a user, which will capture any changes they make within their session. So this introduces the concept of personalization in a non-persistent environment. So that's quite a powerful offering to be able to deliver. So one thing to emphasize is that layering isn't virtualization, so layered apps aren't isolated from each other. It's the same limitations you have with any layering solution. The apps have to be able to play nice, so having different versions of Java in different layers doesn't kind of solve conflicts. From the OS's perspective, they're all still there, they're all still accessible. From other applications' perspectives, it can see into different layers as well. So that's just one thing to be cautious of, is that it is not a virtualization solution. However, you can use layers as a mechanism for deploying virtualized applications. So you can put app-v packages into layers, you can put thin app packages into layers, so there are solutions for solving compatibility challenges. So I mentioned the platform layer earlier. So what does the platform layer actually consist of? So we've got our application layers, we've got our OS layers. Underneath that, we've got our platform layer. Now, the platform layer is basically anything that the OS is going to need to execute on a particular platform. So that'll be device drivers, that'll be, in the platform layer, you can include things like VDAs, virtual desktop agents, you may include VMware tools, Hyper-V integration tools, Azure components, anything that's going to be required for that OS to be able to run on a particular platform. Where this gets quite powerful is the fact that because you can separate out the runtime dependencies for your image to run in a particular environment, it means that that becomes inherently changeable. So where you have workloads that you're deploying on VMware at the moment, if you have a tactical requirement to deploy something on Hyper-V, you can do that. You just need to create a new platform layer, and then you can deploy exactly the same image, but onto Hyper-V or Acropolis. Now, where we're talking about the cloud, having the ability to take something that you're running on-prem on VMware or Hyper-V and deploy exactly the same stack into Azure or AWS, and the only layer that you're having to change is the platform layer to support the platform that you want it to run on. So that simplifies migrating workloads between different environments quite a lot. Especially when people are looking at cloud hosting as more of a commodity. Imagine being able to migrate to the cloud into Azure and then having the option of, for cost reasons or kind of there may be some other benefits, being able to move that workload into AWS. And again, you change the one layer and then you've got that portability. So the headlines of application layering: marketing will call it 100% application compatibility. Is 99.5. There's always going to be some that will have issues. The majority of use cases, things that don't play well in app virtualization, so things for system services, device drivers, those are fine in app layering. So the vast majority of apps will work perfectly fine in an app layering solution. It solves a lot of application and image management problems. You're managing one instance of an application, you're managing that separately from others. You're managing one instance of an OS, one instance of platform components, and you can mix and match those as you need to meet your build requirements. It offers close integration with a lot of platform tools. The ability to deliver layers into XenApp is particularly interesting, and Unidesk are the only layering solution that's certified for Azure. In fact, if you go on the Azure marketplace, there is a Unidesk appliance which is available there with a 7-day trial license in it. So if anyone fancies having a tinker with it, then that's a very easy way to get started. So we'll move on to Citrix Cloud. I'm sure a lot of you will have heard about Citrix Cloud as a concept. So what Citrix Cloud is effectively doing is kind of taking away the management functions from your network. When you're deploying XenApp and XenDesktop, you typically have an amount of infrastructure which is required to support that. What Citrix Cloud enables you to do is remove that infrastructure from your network, take it away, it becomes invisible and goes behind the curtain. What you then become responsible for is your workloads. The actual, the apps, the data, and the network still remain in a location of your choosing. That can be in your data center, or it could be in a cloud service provider. So the fact that the management moves into the cloud doesn't mean that your workload has to. Your workload can remain in whichever location you're comfortable with. So why are businesses looking at moving to Citrix Cloud? So one of the, I'd say, improvements from Citrix in recent times is they've moved to a fast release cycle. So what you'll see is that roughly once a quarter, there's a new version of XenApp and XenDesktop being released, which is fantastic. The rate of innovation has rocketed in recent times, which is fantastic for us because we get a lot of new capabilities and new features to play with. But from a customer perspective, if you want those new features, then you don't necessarily want to look at upgrading your infrastructure every 3 months to be able to gain those benefits. Citrix Cloud addresses that by the nature that it's evergreen, because the platform, well, because the management infrastructure is maintained and supported by Citrix. Citrix have a cloud-first approach, so new releases go into the cloud before they're available for on-prem customers. So it is literally the case that you could go home one day, come in the next, and you've been upgraded to the new version and have new capabilities available. Supporting multi-geo deployments, again, is a very powerful capability. With zones and LHCs, some of the on-prem issues are being addressed. However, when you're looking at large-scale multi-geo deployments, cloud can deliver a really simple solution for managing kind of dispersed infrastructure. Owning less servers is a common requirement. Customers don't necessarily want like 3 delivery controllers, 3 storefront servers, and the SQL cluster. That's a lot of kit to maintain when they just want to focus on delivering applications and desktops to their users. The integration with cloud hosting, people want to know that it's going to work well with Azure, with AWS, and again, the cloud-first strategy means that a lot of the cloud integration is available to Citrix Cloud customers in advance of on-prem customers. So there's a lot of nice integration points there. And time to value. People want to be able to adopt these technologies. They want to be able to get the new functionality, but get it out to the business, because effectively that's why people implement these solutions, is to add value to the business. And the fact that you don't have to install, configure, maintain the infrastructure means that you're able to add value to the business a lot faster with cloud. So what's new in cloud? So there are a few announcements in cloud. So they've moved to a new identity provider. What this has basically done is facilitate integration with Azure AD. So rather than introducing a new identity system with multiple integrations to multiple different identity providers, Azure AD provides out-of-the-box integration with, I believe, over 20 third-party authentication solutions. So in terms of best impact, Citrix Cloud now integrates with Azure AD, so you can then choose the authentication provider of your preference. So that includes things like using Azure MFA, ADFS, or Okta tend to be quite common ones. So this is one of the kind of first in a tranche of planned security changes. So there's going to be some more enhancements coming around kind of role-based access control, which is going to be developed a lot further this year. So there's some interesting things to keep on top of there. Just wait for the screen to refresh. So there are also some licensing changes announced. So there are now programs available for customers with on-prem XenApp and XenDesktop licensing to either trade up their licenses to Citrix Cloud or to transition their licenses to Citrix Cloud. Now these are designed to be cost-effective for existing customers with active SA or SWM to be able to get the value of Citrix Cloud without incurring a lot of additional costs. So if that's something of interest, then it's certainly worth a discussion with your account managers. So Citrix Smart Tools. Some of these services have actually been around for a while, but a lot of people don't know that they're actually able to use them. So Smart Tools is a set of services that are hosted in Citrix Cloud, which are available for use for cloud and on-prem customers. So just to run through them quickly, Smart Migrate is aimed at migrating customers off legacy platforms. So, for example, XenApp 6.5 onto the newer FMA architecture. So that would be a 7.x version. Smart Check is actually a new service. So it's a cloud-hosted service which will effectively health check your Citrix environment. So it uses the built-in test services in a XenApp or XenDesktop implementation to interrogate your system and identify any outstanding issues that need to be addressed. So it may be a case of recommending patches or identifying that you've got a stopped service which could impact on availability. So it's certainly something that's worthwhile making use of. Smart Scale's a very, very powerful tool when you're looking at using XenApp and XenDesktop in the cloud. It's in a similar vein to the older power and capacity management, but optimized for cloud workloads. So it gives you the ability to, based on either usage or time schedule, to scale up and scale down the services that you're delivering. So it can actually save you quite a lot of money when you're running workloads in the cloud. And Smart Build is a tool set that enables you to deploy and maintain your workload. So it has the ability to deploy blueprints, which are a set of instructions or installations or configurations that will configure and build your environment. So there are some very comprehensive POC deployments available in there. So if you were interested in deploying a cloud-based proof of concept, there are some blueprints in there that you can click through, provide it with some information, and point it at your Azure subscription, and away you go. So Smart Tools licensing, I'll just leave this up on screen for a moment. So as you can see, if you're an existing Citrix customer with active Select or software maintenance, then you actually have access to Smart Build, Smart Migrate, and Smart Check today. Platinum customers also have access to Smart Scale. So to quickly run through XenApp Essentials, so for any Azure Remote App customers, they now have, well, they will shortly have XenApp Essentials available to them, so they are able to move away from Azure Remote App. Now, what are the benefits they're going to get from this? So in terms of user experience, as LJ mentioned earlier, they're going to have access to their applications using HDX, so they're going to get superior user experience. And they can access them from anything they can run receiver on, so that opens up a whole new way of working for some users. Also, any apps that require GPUs, they've now got the ability to do that. XenApp Essentials customers also have access to the Smart Scale service, so this again gives them the ability to dynamically scale the resources they have deployed. It's able to support user groups as opposed to individual users, which is an enhancement over a remote app. They have enhanced monitoring available, so a version of Citrix Director is available for those users, so they have enhanced manageability. And users can span multiple app collections, which was a major limitation of Remote App previously. So being able to assign users to multiple sets of resources is particularly powerful for customers moving away from Remote App. And customers have greater control over their data and workloads, and they can actually manage those environments using the policies available in Group Policy. So customers adopting XenApp Essentials also have use of NetScaler Gateway as a service, which is hosted in Citrix Cloud. So that enables remote access to their set of applications. So one key difference to point out between Remote App and XenApp Essentials is that the application workloads are actually hosted in the customer's Azure tenant rather than Microsoft tenant. Now, this is brilliant in terms of control. However, one consideration is the fact that the customers do have greater responsibility for managing the workload. So you're responsible for maintaining its availability. You're responsible for patching and managing that particular environment. So I think for the sake of
there's pros and cons to both, but I think ultimately customers get a better choice. It also therefore also enables organizations and partners such as Ultima to actually help customers build out those high availability environments for delivering virtual applications from XenApp Essentials. I suppose that's the way I'd sum it up.
Completely, no, that's exactly right. So I think for the sake of time we'll skip the video because I know we're running quite close, but there is a YouTube link for anyone who's interested in seeing a run through of the XenApp Essentials preview. So Xen Desktop Essentials, which LJ mentioned previously, so Xen Desktop Essentials is going to follow the same model as XenApp Essentials. So like XenApp Essentials, it's going to be sold through the Azure Marketplace. Now it's going to provide a similar interface to XenApp Essentials, but with the purpose of delivering Windows 10 current branch for business from Azure. So it's quite specific in terms of the version that you're allowed to run, so it's just important to note that it is the Windows 10 current branch for business which will be delivered as part of this service. So when it launches, customers will have access to a cut-down version of Citrix Studio. So the intention is that it's going to have a similar web interface to XenApp Essentials, but on day one it's likely to be a restricted version of Citrix Studio with only the ability to deploy to Azure. So again, that's just one key thing to emphasize, is that XenApp and Xen Desktop Essentials are Azure only. So they are not, they do not support deploying to other cloud providers. Both of the offerings do include 24/7/365 support and access to use Citrix Smart Scale to scale up and down the workloads, which I think is becoming kind of more of a requirement in the cloud these days. Right, so earlier we've had a look at the NetScaler and Intune integration and how, oh, just wait for the screen to update. There we go. So Citrix announced some new services which will enhance Microsoft EMS. So what this is basically aimed at is customers that are using EMS. EMS is fantastic. It's great value, and it's clear why a lot of customers adopt it. What there are, though, is some gaps in the offering where some customers may want more. Now, what the Citrix and Microsoft partnership have kind of worked together to deliver is basically an enhancement which Citrix can provide in addition to EMS to be able to fill some of those gaps for customers. So what the offerings include. So from a security perspective, it includes usage rights for Zen Mobile MDM. So the Zen Mobile MDM is particularly powerful in comparison with Intune, and it enables a significant number of additional policy-based controls for creating a high security posture for devices. In terms of experience, Citrix are going to be providing some EMS-enabled versions of the secure apps, so secure mail, secure notes, and secure web, and secure tasks. There'll be EMS-enabled versions of those applications, which will be available soon.
Andy, do you mind if I jump in there?
Go for it.
Sure. So what we're actually doing here is we're effectively taking the Zen Mobile and EMS, putting the two together in a couple ways. So one of them is going to allow Intune to leverage Netscaler to create per application VPNs, one. Two, you'll be able to also take the Citrix secure applications, and they will be what we call EMS or Intune enlightened with their SDK, meaning that it will actually be able to happily coexist, having Intune being enrolled with Intune and then leveraging Zen Mobile on top of that to provide all the application benefits that we have around our MDX framework to secure native mobile applications for iOS and Android. And we'll start to extend and grow upon on the Windows platform as Microsoft develops that piece further moving forwards. Back to you, Andy.
Perfect, thanks, LJ. So how are these going to be made available? So for EMS customers, if there's the Zen Mobile Essentials for EMS bundle. Now this will include micro VPNs for EMS enlightened applications. It will include the Zen Mobile Secure apps, and it will also include the Secure MDM service provided by Zen Mobile, hosting Citrix Cloud. As an enhancement above that, there's also going to be Citrix Workspace Essentials for EMS, which will incorporate Zen Mobile Essentials, so all of the above features. It will also include the Citrix Cloud Zen App and Zen Desktop service and Citrix Cloud Share File service also. So there's some packages that will be available shortly, which will add some significant functionality for existing EMS customers. So going into other updates, ShareFile. So ShareFile doesn't tend to get a lot of the headlines, but there's been some significant changes as of late. So if any of you are ShareFile customers who have used it recently, you may notice there's been an overhaul of the UI. So there's a new modernized interface with dashboard capabilities, and the overall web app has been kind of radically redesigned to make it, in my opinion, kind of far more usable and friendly, and makes your data kind of easy to access. There's a lot of workflows that have been integrated to assist with business processes. So for example, you've got the ability to do real-time document editing in Office 365, and also the use of e-signatures to be able to integrate into your workflows. You've got information rights management, which is built into the solution, which can protect your documents even if data leaves your immediate control. You've got the ability to view any documents in line when you're going through them, which I find particularly useful. Being able to find the right document without having to open and download multiples makes it a lot more time efficient. They've got some quite powerful document approval workflows, which can simplify your business process quite a lot. If you've got a document that you need to sign off on, then being able to send that document to approvers who can then kind of like send back edits, or they can sign off the document for release. I think that's quite a powerful workflow which a lot of businesses could benefit from. One of the really interesting ones is cloud connectors, so where customers are using cloud storage. So things like OneDrive for Business are a perfect example. Being able to integrate those into your ShareFile interfaces really gives you a kind of single pane view of your document storage, and kind of makes them imminently more accessible. One of the very powerful integrations is combining the Drive Mapper client for ShareFile, which is the recommended client for a XenApp environment, and the Cloud Connectors. Effectively gives you a way to introduce OneDrive for Business into virtual environments, which has some challenges operating in that respect. But integrating the Drive Mapper client and the Cloud Connectors then lets you present your OneDrive for Business content into a virtual environment without the same performance and capacity limitations that you'd have trying to do that without any other solution in place. And also they're introducing some third-party support. So if for some reason someone's not using Zen Mobile, then if they're using Intune or Mobile Iron, then there's a ShareFile app available which is enlightened for those solutions. So I'm just going to hand over to LJ, who's going to give you some information on some of the new SD-WAN enhancements.
That's right. Brilliant. Can you hear me okay, Andy?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Cool. So I've just got one point, but I'm just going to give you a bit of context around that. So at our partner event this year, we introduced Zero Touch Deployments, or ZTD. We did unfortunately I didn't get the video in time, but effectively what we did is, for those of you that had seen the cable cutting demo last year, we effectively brought in SD-WAN, Netscaler SD-WAN appliance onto stage using a drone. It was pretty spectacular. I'll see if I can get the video before we send out the slides and actually just show you the actual Netscaler going up on stage. Now, while the Netscaler was actually dropped off on stage and they started to unbox it, they effectively just plugged in all the cables, and while they plugged in the cables, they then hit the power switch. Once the power switch was starting, they then went into just a bit of a talk around what we can actually now do with Netscaler SD-WAN, which is it's an appliance that starts to replace a lot of your networking appliances at the end site. So things like we now have an integrated firewall coming in the next release. Over and above that, you get greater visibility into your network, as well as also the applications running across that network. We're able to accelerate your WAN traffic, so both for Citrix and non-Citrix traffic. So an example of this could be you send out a bunch of these appliances to your branch offices. You perhaps have an all-hands meeting once a quarter to that one of the CXOs tells the organization how the company is doing, and effectively we can then capture that stream from the first person that initiates the connection, keep all that traffic on the device, and then locally disperse it locally to those users through the SD-WAN appliance. We can also bond multiple internet connections together to provide high availability and different levels of quality of service. Likewise, also giving you the ability to, instead of having to upgrade your MPLS network, say from a 5 meg bearer to 10, which is going to cost you potentially a fortune, you can potentially go down the route of getting 1 or 2 different broadband providers in for potentially a fraction of the cost, giving you, say, 25 gigabits each, and actually bonding those together to give you a much greater throughput across the internet between your branch office or offices and the data center. It's all secured over a VPN, and you've got quality service across there too. So in summary, what does this actually do? Effectively, you plug in the cables in the box. It has an automated bring up internally within the box. It automatically authenticates to the network. Once it authenticates to the network, it thereafter then communicates with the control plane on the back end and then begins the deployment process, which the admin can then see actually as it's coming online, what services are being brought up, what configuration it's got, and you can see the tick boxes going along. So within a few minutes, the device is up and running. It's got an integrated firewall, obviously set up the VPN to allow traffic between the branch office and the data center, and you've got full deep insight visibility into the network. So that's pretty much one of the key highlights around Netscaler SD-WAN that has come out from Citrix. There's going to be more coming around the synergy timeframe as well. With that, I'll hand back to Andy and Colin. Thank you very much. If you have any questions, please drop them into the chat window or the questions pane.
Brilliant. Thanks, LJ, and thanks, Andy, for doing your section as well. So, like LJ said there, if you've got any questions, please do post them in the questions section. We'll be online for a few more minutes, just monitoring it, seeing if you've got any further questions at all around what's come up in Citrix Summit.
Colin, just a final note from me. I presume we're going to be sending out the slides to all the attendees as well later on today, either today or tomorrow.
Yeah, so as a follow-up, we'll be sending out the slides, as well as the webinar has been recorded, so that will be going up onto our YouTube channel as well. So anyone that wants to recap on anything that's been said or shown, it will be up on YouTube in the next couple of days.
Brilliant.
Just to give you an update as well, if you go to the Ultima website as well, we've got some things called package services on there as well, and we offer some package services around the Citrix health checks, so we can prepare you for some of the upgrades and some of the new announcements that's happened in this as well. So yeah, feel free to go and check out our ultima.com and have a look at some of our package services that are on there to help you with sort of migrating to this and transforming and optimizing your Zen app and Zen desktop services. So if we've got no further questions at all from any of the attendees, I'd like to say thank you for all attending, and hope to see you soon on the next webinar from Ultima. If you want to see what's coming up with webinars, events, or agendas, go to ultima.com website, and you'll see all of our events listed on there for the next sort of few months coming forward. We've got some exciting new ones coming in, and more immersion dates around how Windows 10 and Citrix are working together within Azure. So feel free to check those out as well. So without any further ado, I'd like to say thank you very much for attending, and hope to speak to you soon. Thank you.
Cheers. Take care. Bye.